Well, thanks everyone for joining this morning, or I guess this afternoon if you're attending from out east. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started is just that this webinar is being recorded and we'll be sending this out via email to all of our registered attendees and out to all of our winter operations customers as well. So if we have you on file as using our Geotab winter operations solution, you'll get an email and other members of your team to watch the recording. So if you weren't able to attend today, that's all right. We will have all this information jam-packed in for a session you can enjoy anytime. All right, and on the Zoho meetings here, just for the folks that haven't used it before, along the bottom row is where you can ask additional questions or send comments into the team. So if you have a question along my presentation, I will have some time for Q&A at the end. We'll be reserved about 5-10 minutes for Q&A, depending on our questions. And please feel free to drop that into the chat or into the little bubble question for Q&A below. Also, we have a few of our team members here, Andrew Wang, Mark, and Jordan. And Jesse, they're coming from our support team and our public works management team, and they will be ready to answer questions for you as well. So please feel free to drop it in. All right, let's get started. So what I wanted to do today for you folks is we're going to be covering a lot of information, but I want to make it understandable and useful for everybody. So we're first going to be going over some of the basics. So we're going to be touching on hardware checks as well as resources for if you need to book any kind of assistance for a third-party installer, whether that's through your own contacts or through one of ours at Here at Advantage. As well as some of the basics on the software. And then we'll get into more of the details. So I'll cover the key points that we need to have, and then I'll expand on each of those sections as we go a little bit farther into the presentation. All right, so just a quick overview of our agenda here. We're going to be going through more or less the kind of the basics of what a winter light up even means. So winter preparation, winter light up, all these different, you can call it a dozen different things. Really the end of the year, what we're trying to get ready for is the snowfall. That's going to be making sure we're checking everything from all of the individual pieces of hardware that we have in our snow plows, that's sensors that we've attached to your plows or connections we plugged into your spreader machines to tell us what's being spread and how much and how fast. Making sure that our software components are in place as well. So everything's plugged in on the hardware side. There are a couple steps you need to take to review for each plow to make sure that we're actually going to be receiving that data inside of Geotab, as well as, always the fun stuff like billing and, technical configurations and other things like that. There's a few things to watch out for. So items that you might need to spend a little time troubleshooting, things that you might find as failure points, and will want to end up purchasing replacement hardware if you do find damage that you can't repair, and then just going over some general verification steps, make sure everything's wrapped up and it's in a repeatable process that you can actually take for each plow, each sidewalk machine, each piece of basically any kind of winter equipment. I was trying to think of another material spreader or another component, but really regardless if it has a plow blade on it, if it has a material spreader box, if it's plowing roads or active transportation lanes, it's all part of the winter setup, and we want to make sure that's all running correctly. So jumping into what is winter light up and why do we do it? We're making sure that everything's working. It really comes down to it's a piece of equipment by equipment audit of your fleet prior to the snow falling and making sure that it's working correctly. When you tell it the plow blade is up or down, it's actually showing that to you and to your operators and dispatch desk, making sure that when it says I'm spreading salt or sand salt mix at whatever rate per kilogram per lane kilometer, that's actually showing up for your reporting. So when you go do a post-season review, you can actually see the material totals and match them up against your contracting documents. So if anybody who's dropping off the sand, making sure that what you got in is what's going out, And if there's any material changes or reductions that you're able to make, you can point those out and have the data to power your reports, especially back to City Council when you're doing your winter light up review to them and saying, we are ready for the season. And this is the data that can help form part of that presentation as well. So not only that, but it's also like when I say audit, I mean literally taking care of things where we have a lot of times we have these vehicles parked for a solid 6 months, 8 months out of the year. They're only really active when the snow starts falling. So they are vehicles that usually get put under that I guess not literal tarp, but they get put into the garage, parked, disconnected, and they don't get checked up until this coming season. So this is part of the work as well, is to make sure that while you're pulling them out of mothballs to get them ready for the season, you're checking things like dead batteries, making sure you have the keys, making sure all of the hardware itself. So when I say hardware, I mean like the actual plow body, all your chains, all of your spreader boxes, things like that. All those physical pieces are actually ready to go. And we're also tying in the Geotab side of things, where we're having that data and those sensor overlays that we put on top of that truck, make sure that's reporting as well. So it's kind of a holistic, all-in-one capture of what we're doing. And then, of course, we want to make sure that we link some of this back to also, useful objectives for your business as well. So the folks at City Council or your supervisors or your management staff that are looking for useful information that you can help aid their departments, whether it's liability checks, so making sure you have the proof that if you have a complaint to process through legal, you can provide data to back up the city's story and show that trail of evidence that these are the actions that our operators were trained for and took during the storm. Doing all those investigations, checking up, like I said earlier, about your contract documents, making sure that if you said you had 500 tons of sand and salt delivered to your facilities, how much of that actually went out on the roads and how much is still sitting in the dome. You can use that to make post-season adjustments, find efficiencies, find spots where you may have overspread, and use that data to really drive forward a potential reduction in your material budgets, or at least allocating them more efficiently, making sure that what you bought is going out on the roads in an effective way, and that you're also in compliance with any internal mandates or external mandates, say from the province or the state, telling you, you can't spread certain materials in certain places, and have accountability when those events do occur, as well as just, general compliance and oversight. So, having that information to prove that, this is how your operation is running, you're hitting your service level targets. So, everything's being completed by a certain amount specified in, say, your minimum standards. You have the data to back it up. And then you can actually also show the public. So this is information you can pass on through just reporting out to City Council or out to the media, and you have the information to back that information up and just make sure it's public. We also have software solutions that allow the public to actually directly see those operations as well. So I know a bunch of our customers here at Advantage either utilize our Citizen Insight product, which is basically a live plow map showing to the public where those plows are on a short time delay, so they can check before they leave work if that's their streets have been plowed, and they can take a more efficient route home, or at least they know what they're getting into. We also have customers that direct our data into their own platforms, and I've seen some amazingly creative maps and very astute uses of our data to show the public exactly where their tax dollars are going for how these roads are being maintained, how those active transportation lanes are being maintained. So it's really great. All right, so that's a lot of information about the why and the what we're touching. What are we getting up to over here? And when somebody comes knocking about the effort that we're doing this uplift and why are we integrating it, a lot of these business drivers are directly linked to your real world outcomes, and our technology helps you get there. So let's get into actually the meat and potatoes for the rest of the presentation. We have about 35, 40 minutes left. And I wanted to really take you through the checklist. So as we're going through this, you have this recording and you have the Advantage team to back you up. So reach out to your account manager, feel free to reach out to myself and also my co-winter conspirator, Andrew Wang. We both have extensive experience in the technical details of all the winter light-up and other Geotab technologies. Your account manager can also help steer you towards resources for the more business level aspect as well. So overall, the Advantage team can take care of you, help make sure everything is lined up, and we are here to be your resources to help you through this process. So as we do that, I want to actually go through this checklist of what you need to know and what more or less highlighting what needs to be done first, second, and third. And then, like I said, we can get into more of the how-tos and the technical stuff later on. And more directly, we want to interface with your teams directly to find out how you're doing it now and make any improvements. A lot of you watching this webinar already have a lot of these facilities set up. So this is more, like I said, a checklist to make sure that you go through each one and you're like, okay, great. I have 100 plows and I have 90 of them that are matching my specs. I'm happy. I can check that they're working. The other 10, hey, I need to call somebody in really quick because my team is dedicated to doing something else. They're resourcing at the moment. Let's call somebody in and work out, somebody come and fix those up. Basically, be able to go through that checklist, make sure everything's working. So starting from the top, we're going to go from the boring stuff, the more fun stuff, which is, and of course, dealing with the financials is, depending on where you are in the organization, might be something you're dealing with every day. It also might be something you have never touched before. So especially if you're, doesn't matter which group you're in, we want to make sure that we have all of our plow and pretty much all of our winter assets that are using our material collection system to be on the correct rate plan. So a quick breakdown here. So just what's called the Pro Plus Public Works Plan is what you'll see when you're subscribed using one of your larger vehicles that have a spreader box and a plow attached. So a quick distinction that I don't have in my slide notes here is actually that. So for winter assets that are usually like your single or your tandem axle trucks, essentially anything that's 5 tons or greater, you have a snow plow or a material spreading box in the back, you're going to usually have our iWorks Works cable plus the Pro Plus Public Works Plan. So that's necessary when you are using a spreader box and when you're using a snow plow and you're collecting that digital data to come across. So I'm talking about, if you have a certified Cirrus or a Bosch Rexroth controller, Dickie John, any of those types of kind of digital controllers that we're feeding live data in from, you'll need this iWorks Works cable plus the Pro Plus Public Works Plan. So when we're going through our list of devices, we just want to double check that rate plan matches the Pro Plus Public Works, and that will help us ensure that we're actually going to get that data feed coming in for the winter season. So if you don't have it active right now, say if you did it seasonally, you shut it off for the summer, brought it back in the winter, reach out to your account manager. We'll help you get those things queued up. So that way, say come October 1st or November 1st, whatever the snow starts flying in your jurisdiction, you want to activate that plan. Earlier, that 1 month earlier is usually best. So you don't have to worry about it. Reach out to your account manager. We can help you make sure that stuff's in the right place. So that's for anything with the iWorks Works cable, which we'll touch a little bit more detail in a second here. For your smaller vehicles, so sidewalk plows, pickup trucks with a front blade that you use to clear parking lots, things like that, those are fine on the Pro Plus plan or the Go plan. Those will have all the features that you need because we're not pulling in that digital spreader data. So that's the big distinction there is Public Works plan for when you have a big tandem axle truck, your regular rate plan for if you're just using a regular pickup truck with the front blade that you put on the front just for winter kind of thing. Next up, thing that you want to think about, and this also ties into your procurement and billing, is do you need resources? Do we have the capabilities in your team this year? Things change. We have staff that move to different roles or resourcing changes for new projects where, maybe you do have a lot of work on your plate. Do you need assistance from an outside installer? We have links to multiple install companies across the country, both the US and Canada. Reach out to your Advantage One account manager if you need some help. So that would be anything from talking to the folks at, say, Charge Install if you were anywhere on the west coast of Canada, say Daikan out in the east, or someone else down south, or even just resources for your internal team. We have those as well, so we can help you out if you have some available resources, but just need some extra help to catch up with a few of the extra plows on your roster. Please reach out. We can help coordinate that and get that program working successfully. And same thing for resources for your internal team. We have extensive lists of one-pager documents on how to install and test things like digital spreader controllers, what cables are supposed to be plugged in, what part numbers are supposed to be there. It gets pretty detailed, but we have those resources available for your internal teams as well. So please reach out if you need any of those things. And I'll try to package it in when Jordan sends out the listing or the recording. I'll try to package as many links for him. He can send out in the companion email as well. And that way you'll have it all at your fingertips. All right, and this kind of ties back right to my previous slide about the rate plan stuff. We have a handful of major components that we deal with here. We have the Go device, and everybody has that in their vehicles. We've got our iWEC works cable, which is the winter specific cable, that's when we're connecting to the controller, plus a front plow or belly plow or whatever it might be. We have that digital data capability. We also have the iWEX aux, which is the classic input cable. So, switches on, switches off, plow is up, plows down, or spreader machine, like your basic kind of like your salt dog, truck borne one is in the back of your pickup truck. And it's as simple, is that machine running or not? That's the iWEX aux cable. So those are your main pieces of hardware that we're really actually thinking of in the Geotab ecosystem. So you'll see references to these throughout the deck and throughout our time here today. So let's actually get familiar quickly here with the kind of equipment that we're dealing with. Now, this is no secret to any of you watching this presentation, but if you're new to this world, or if you haven't really had a ton of exposure to the outside fleet, here's a good kind of easy primer on the kind of equipment we're dealing with. So when I'm talking about vehicles that'll receive the iWEX works cable, I'm talking about things like our large tandem axle trucks or our single axles. They have usually one or more blades on the front, on the side for moving snow, as well as a material box at the back that is spreading. So when you're looking at a spreader, is it spreading salt, sand, a mix? Are we out there doing liquid application prior to the snowfall for basically anti-icing, making sure things aren't nothing's getting stuck for as long as we can keep the road clear. When we're getting into the smaller stuff, and when I say smaller, I mean when we're not talking about digital spreader controls, that's when we're getting to things like these pickup trucks that have your front plow blade on them. We're talking about bike lanes and sidewalk plows, so those little trackless units or bobcats, or even when we're getting to just larger snow move equipment like graders. If we have a grader fleet out there, or anybody else is running a yellow iron, that's what we're going to be running, we're going to be encountering as well. And these are kind of just different examples of winter equipment that you have out in there in the fleet. And they all share common pieces of hardware that report that information back to your office, so that way you can see how well things are going on in the fleet. So all of these have their own unique challenges associated with them, but the core pieces still remain. Is my plow sensors telling me the plow blade is up or down? If I have a material spreader, is it on or off? How much am I spreading? What kind of material am I spreading? Are all these pieces of information coming in for me? And if they're not, this is part of the winter light up. Is what we want to do is actually go through this checklist to make sure that those things are actually switched on correctly, and we are actually seeing live communication coming in from our devices. So like I said, plow telemetry, spreader box telemetry, making sure that those numbers are accurate is a big one too. So kind of a big, I guess our big rule that kind of applies to a lot of different stuff is garbage in equals garbage out. So if your sensor is on the fritz, that's a repair. If your spreader controller is providing information that is way off base, you've loaded 100 pounds of salt in the back for calibration tests, and the machine says you put out 450. that's a problem. Okay? Because if the computer is miscalibrated and telling us that we're spreading the incorrect amount of material, your numbers in the back end are going to be not productive for you post-season review. So there's things you want to check to make sure, all the basics. Are all the lights on? Do we have our Geotab reporting our location? Are we getting engine data? Are we getting telemetry in from the basic Go device? Location, who, what, when, where, and why? Are we getting up, down information from the plows? Are we getting information from the correct information from the spreader controller? And then also just a couple of notes about things like battery bypasses. Battery bypasses can be an effectively very annoying thing if you don't have it in your notes. So some of this too is also great to inform and have feedback into your usual PM or maintenance schedule of notes. So if you're maintaining this fleet in a product like an AssetWorks M5 or Fleetio or any other FMIS like a Faster or an RTA, these are valuable notes to consider having inside of your maintenance software as well. So that way your technicians don't get caught off guard when they're being asked to go do something on this vehicle and they weren't aware that we had, say the Geotab cable plugged in. We want to make sure that they're informed, whatever other third-party teams are informed, and that way it makes our job and your job easier to coordinate, and all the technicians on the ground actually doing the work have the tools they need and the information they need as well. So really quick note about the hardware that you're going to see in the vehicle. Now, this is, I have a few videos for you to reference as part of the materials that we'll be sending out. Really helpful kind of guides put together by the folks at Geotab Field Services. They've been basically out there with a GoPro recording everything that they can find, which is amazing for us and for everybody to have those video references. But this is just an easy picture of what's more or less inside of your vehicle. So this is for example, this is something like a single axle plow with a Rexroth spreader box and the hydraulic hardware in the back and the head up in the inside of the machine for the operator to control, front plow blade. And this is the Geotab connections that we do. So we have our Go device and our T harness. That is what you need to have for your basics. That's the fundamental Geotab stuff that we know and love. This IOX works or aux cable. This is what's actually connecting that telemetry. So the plow up and down sensor, and then the spreader integration cable that actually plugs into your digital spreader head. So say that Rexroth, it has a particular model of cable, making sure that you link from our hardware over to Rexroth, and that's what makes the connection and makes everything run. So what do you need in place? First of all, you need to make sure that your Geotab unit is actually powered on. So is it alive? Especially with this equipment that doesn't run for most of the season until now. Some of this you want to make sure that your batteries are charged. You can start the vehicle, and then once you have the vehicle up and running, does your Go device actually light up? Do you see it providing information back to you on your dashboard? So if you're looking at, say, for example, your list of snowplows, do you see any offline alerts? So I'm just going to use this database as a quick example. Do you see any alarms for, hey, this vehicle's been offline for a few days, or it's running out in the yard, but it still shows up as offline? That's a question. If you're not sure how to deal with that, reach out to your account manager or the support team. They'll be happy to help you walk you through that troubleshooting. Make sure that Geotab portion is online, because that's going to be item number one. Is it plugged in? Is it online? And then most importantly, is it on the right rate plan? So when we're talking about the Pro Plus Public Works for our spreader controller based machines, do we have the appropriate rate plan assigned to that vehicle? In this case, this vehicle does not have a digital spreader controller, so it's perfectly fine to have this Pro Plus mode here. But if we did have a digital spreader controller, that's where you want to see it show up as, say, Pro Plus Public Works. Otherwise, you won't get the data that you need. And then, of course, going down the line, we want to make sure that our works cable is, in fact, plugged into the appropriate spreader cable. Check for things like damage. If there's any green crusties floating about for corrosion, double check the connectors. Have the installer go through and double check those connectors if there's suspicion that it might have been exposed to water or you're seeing any other problems. to kind of help you get through the process. Quick note before we continue on past the kind of the basics of the hardware, is that we also have your battery bypass. So if you have a vehicle that you're keeping in storage and typically you have that battery disconnect switch flipped over, depending on how you wired the Geotab up, it's probably going offline with the battery as well, which for a long-term storage, that's depending on what your position is in the fleet, you can, that's probably fine strategy. If you do want to keep the Geotab unit online year round, we have a bypass cable that you can order. It's that little red one here. It just basically separates the constant battery power from your diagnostic port and allows you to wire it directly to the battery terminal. So you can basically have the rest of the vehicle 100% off, and then still have the telematics unit with some battery power to keep checking in and phoning home. And it essentially will just it's all going to do for the season is confirm that your battery still has charge and that the truck is still in the same location it was when you parked it. And then it lights up once you shut the truck off. During the season, that just makes sure the Geotab unit doesn't keep restarting in the middle of service. So if you have a vehicle that spends all night offline, gets called in, gets flipped on, works, and gets shut back off again, this bypass will allow the Geotab unit to function all the time, which means you're not going to be waiting for data to come through or wait for the device to reboot. It's just always there, so it just turns on the truck and makes sure everything's working without any delay. So consider that as an option depending on your operational posture and your demand for these trucks. I recommend it. It's always a good thing to have, but not all folks necessarily need it. But take that into consideration. Reach out if you want to deploy that out to your fleet. So really quick, so this is kind of getting into the software end of things, but I'll relate this back to our example hardware. We have our single axle truck with a Rexroth controller in it. We're going to assume that everything is wired up. We had our installer on site, or we had one of our technicians on site, and they went through all the hardware. There's no green crusties for any corrosion. Everything's plugged in correctly. Basically, we started up from last year, and everything went in smoothly, and our vehicle is healthy. What we want to do next is actually check some of the software items. So all the physical cabling is in place. Nothing really changed from last year. Our plow connections got plugged back in. The connectors are in good condition. So as a bit of a quick aside, double check that as well. Since you're removing your plow blades and your frames, depending on the vehicle and how it's being served or what kind of service duty it does during the year, you might be removing more than just the blade to set the attachment away. When you put it back on and reconnect that proximity sensor, double check that cabling is intact as well. So it's not just what's inside the cab, it's going out and making sure that the sensor cabling that you have running from your plow blade, the weatherproof connector on the exterior, make sure that's plugged in, make sure there's no damage, no cut wires, things like that are a very important part of your assessment as well. Making sure that those external telemetry pieces, those sensors that you paid a lot of money for across the fleet, are working and plugged in. So those are part of the checklist for your hardware as well. But in our fictional scenario here, your installer or your technician has gone through, everything's plugged in, they've raised and lowered the plow, they're happy. Now it's time to make sure that things like the spreader controller is working. Most of the problems that we see are just really configuration issues. Getting everything together on the hardware side with a good, reliable installer, or you have experienced staff, those pieces are the big lift in the beginning. And then after that, it's really maintenance to make sure that whenever the vehicle is serviced, that things are just stay plugged in, tied down, everything's working electrically. But once we're past that, the next biggest thing really is configuration. So this is getting into the hardware side of things. And like I said, feel free to reach out to Advantage to help you step through some of the stuff. If you're not, if this might be your first time administering some of these more technical items, but we want to make sure our configuration. So the iWix work cable, if you have one, and like I said, many of you do, we want to make sure that the configuration on the cable matches the kind of hardware we have in the vehicle. So if you have a Rexroth, say CS550, we want to make sure that the Geotab works cable is told that you have a CS550 spreader controller connected. So because if we just leave it there, it might not ever get told what kind of hardware it's working with. So it's not actually going to produce data. So you'll be halfway through your winter season. You'll be wondering what happened to the truck once 1065 and why it hasn't been telling you anything about what kind of materials it's been doing. And it's likely because somebody forgot to go in and check the configuration. So easiest way to handle that, there's a little add-in called the spreader controller configuration. So the spreader controller add-in, it's under the public works menu in productivity. So on your Geotab left side menu, it lives underneath productivity, public works, and you'll have your, in this case, this customer does not have spreader controllers connected, but you'll have a spreader controller config menu here as well that you can use that option for, and this is where we configure the panel. So we want to make sure that's matching correctly. So important, like I said, important that the cable gets matched to the kind of controller that you're using. So if your vehicle has a Rexroth, make sure that it has a matching configuration. If you have a Dickie John, make sure that that Rexroth or that Dickie John is plugged in, and your work cable is told you're using this, say, Dickie John control point. Super simple to actually, once you get used to it, super simple to go in and configure and make sure everything's matching. And that page also allows you to double check that you're receiving the right information as well. So we do have handy one-page guides on where the cables go and what it gets plugged into, but it also tells you how to simulate and test. So those are materials that your installer or your technician can use in cooperation with you when you're doing this validation process. So they can do it themselves. You can help them over the phone, however way your internal process wants to function. Essentially, you have this validation step you do inside the software to make sure everything's actually coming through. And then when it comes to things like plow telemetry, we talked about this previously, making sure that everything's connected, like your weatherproof connector is connected. There's no corrosion, no damage to the cabling that runs from the sensor head all the way to the cab. But also less frequent things that you sometimes forget about when you're doing this stuff is the cable's plugged in, but is the sensor aligned? Has it shifted over? Has anything moved? If you have a different plow blade that you upgraded to this year, maybe you put a new buyer's, nice new V blade on the front of your truck. Is the frame and the plow in the right position to actually have that sensor actuate? So making sure the mounting position is correct, making sure that you have it on the right cabling, and then you can also see that information inside of Geotab. So check everything. Check your cabling, check your mount position, raise and lower your plow blade to make sure that that sensor is actually indicating up and down position correctly, and making the adjustments before the snow starts flying when you get into this thing. So plow telemetry, typically we have a proximity sensor is our most common way to do it. That is most popular on everything from a pickup truck all the way to a tandem. Sometimes we do have customers using in-cab air over hydraulic systems like the Daikin Plow Pilot. If you're using those, let's just say put those aside for a quick second. Usually you don't need to do much to maintain them. The whole value position of that product is that you set them up and you can just make sure your air lines are connected, everything's working, and it stays in place, and you just give it a quick review, just like your proximity sensor. But since the prox sensors are on the outside of the vehicle, they're much, much more susceptible to damage. It could be anything from, anybody just poorly mounting the plow. They could just strike the sensor without thinking about it when they're mounting the plow or pulling off. Double check that. Make sure that the actual sensor is there. Make sure that it's aligned correctly. Make sure that the wiring inside the cab is working correctly as well. So you can see that inside of Geotab, where that same kind of spreader controller add-in or an exception rule that pops up and says plow up and down. When you're doing that with a technician in the yard, make sure that's firing and you're seeing that data come through. That'll save you a lot of headaches when you got to pull this plow off the road halfway through a storm because it's not, or after a storm because it hasn't been giving you telemetry data. telemetry data like you're expecting. So it's super important to keep an eye on that. So just as a recap, because we're about 20 minutes top of the hour, check your rate plans, make sure that the appropriate assets, so if you have a works table, like I said, it's in Pro Plus Public Works mode. We want to check our hardware, so make sure all your cabling. So if you need a third-party installer, let us know. If you need some additional support, we can help you get some resources. But whether it's in-house or third-party installer, make sure that everybody's checking the cabling. Make sure that the Geotab device power is on. You get the GPS location and the basics. Make sure that you can raise and lower the plow and it tells you that it's happening in Geotab. Make sure that when you turn on your spreader controller that it's reporting what you see on the screen. So, the numbers match, making sure that your cables are correctly configured. So if you, like I said, if you have a Rexroth, make sure that your works cable knows that it has a Rexroth connected, as well as the plow calibration, what we're going to actually briefly here, is also really important. Make sure that you're not getting garbage in and putting garbage out. Make sure your controllers are calibrated. Make sure your make sure your sensors for your front plow are correctly mounted, correctly positioned to get you that telemetry. So far, if you've gotten all those tick boxes on your list, you are doing very well, and you're almost to the end of the game. For each plow, you repeat this process for each plow, and make sure that's everything's in place. So speaking about calibration of spreader controllers, really important to make sure that usually once a year, and I'm sure a lot of your agents, you folks are doing this already, make sure that you have Cirrus come in or Rexroth come in or whoever else is your dealer, like Viking Cities, if they're the ones you purchase all your equipment through, make sure your dealer comes out once a year and calibrates those controllers. If you put 100 kilograms of salt in, make sure that it shows on the screen that you got 100 kilograms of salt out, because what the controller says on the screen is also what it's sending to Geotab. And if that number is wrong on the screen, it's definitely going to be misinforming you from the back office. So make sure that those pieces are correct. Because like I said, garbage in, garbage out, you don't want any of those numbers off base because we rely on what the machine's telling us. And if the machine's wrong, we're going to be showing you the wrong numbers. And this is a little bit of bonus trivia, just for the folks that do spend a lot of time with the actual equipment itself, making sure that this is part of the calibration repair process for your material spreaders, making sure that things like your auger feedback sensors are working, making sure that your gate sensors are working. Like I said, if you have errors happening on your spreader controller and you don't control for them, you might not be logging data, you might be logging incorrect data, or just in general, the numbers that you're getting. When I say incorrect, the general numbers you're getting are wrong or off by just enough that you end up with wrong totals at the end of the year. Anything from a minor miscalibration all the way to a very obvious major one, it all causes problems for the end of the reporting for the end of the year. So make sure that stuff gets corrected. Engage your dealer to make sure they come out and calibrate and make sure that your equipment is working properly. And the last little bit on the hardware end, we're going to spend a few minutes on some of the software, but a lot of that part of it, the whole process for the software is going to be actually work with your GIS and mapping teams, making sure you have things in place, things are matching up to what you had it configured for last year. But before we jump off of hardware, I do want to show you, and this is some of the links we'll send out, is access to some of these guides. So like I said, we have one-pager guides to show your technicians how and why, basically how, why, and where to connect to things, what steps they need to take to validate part numbers, what steps they need to take to do what's called a ground speed simulation or a testing simulation to make sure that the numbers on the screen match what's going to Geotab, so you can be confident that when you actually go out there for real, you're into your data back and catching any issues. We have these guides for you. We also have all of these links here. I'm going to open up, say, the ePoke one pager here. This is quite literally like a little one, like I said, one pager document on what needs to be plugged in, where it plugs in, and then how to do the testing and setup steps. So if you're running into a piece of equipment that's brand new this year, or maybe just never participated last year, or somebody's been in and done updates to it, have them check, make sure all these settings are actually configured correctly, and you get data out onto Geotab at the end of the process. So super important to make sure that you check through, but we have guidance for all these supported controller types, help you through it. And we also have more information about how to actually deal with some of these configuration tools as well. And we can certainly help you with that as well. So please feel free to submit a support ticket to support@advtracking.net or reach out to your account manager, and happy to help you out there. So I'm going to skip through. Well, I had a few more slides that really talk more in detail about the actual controller data. But what I really want to get into, actually, I'm going to move up a couple of paces, is some of the things you need to make sure you're checking from the software side. So in Geotab, we have pre-built material management reports. We have pre-built trip reports, things that you've used every day during the rest of the year. And we have specialized reports, like I said, for checking material counts and providing kind of year-end or storm-end totals, as well as monitoring for your service levels while you're in the middle of a storm. So are roads being serviced in the timelines that you said they would be as part of your bylaws? So your minimum service standards, how do you check that? How do you make sure you're compliant, communicating that to the public or to your operations team? So some annual checks that you're going to want to also start up, if you haven't already, is doing things like making sure we have the latest copy of your roadmap. So when I say roadmap, I mean that literally, like your streets and roads layer from your mapping team, is that up to date? So if there's been any jurisdictional changes, for example, a customer I have working out in the northeast coast of the US, they have different cooperative agreements with their state DOT, as well as some of the actual surrounding municipalities that are in their county. And roads over the last few years have shifted. Some of them have been now taken over by the state. Some of them have actually moved to the municipalities within the county, and some have been offloaded to the county themselves. So those, while the physical road network itself hasn't changed, you do have instances where the who or what contractor is assigned to do that work has changed. So that responsibility might have been removed from your jurisdiction, depending on where you are and how you're operating. So important things to make sure that you have the latest copy of your streets and roads layer from your mapping team, so we can get it ready for service in Geotab. So what that looks like in the real world for Geotab is, most of you folks have probably encountered, you've heard me actually talk about the road completion feature before. I more like call it service completion is probably a better way to put it. What it is a tool that allows you to place your different road sections and their priorities. So whether they're, like, say, priority ones, or if you organize by district, depending on what you get up to, you might be, depending on how you're formatting your structure, essentially this is kind of a copy of your plow map or your routing map that you do for the dispatching operators. And this is your different routes or different parts of your jurisdiction that you want to make sure is completed. So you're capturing, was my service equipment there? Did it work on that piece of road, and when? So you can find out during a storm, when was it done, or you can debrief after the fact and check on that and say, okay, we hit 85% of our objective. We reached 85% of our roads. Most of them were on time. Our P1s, we did actually reach 4 hours after, say, for example, 4 hours after snowfall ended. Our P1s are clear. We're working on P3s, like all of our non-critical roads. And then during a storm, it also allows you to see when the last time a vehicle had serviced the area as well. So just double check if you have somebody that you need to send back, or if we miss a spot, or something that just, for whatever reason, we just need to make sure that got covered. If it's a critical piece that, say, is a very important arterial road that would get us in the news for not having clear. Terrible example, but it happens sometimes. Sometimes things happen and your resources get pulled away for different stuff. But making sure that you can see that, and you can go redispatch resources to make sure that stuff gets covered and you meet your service objectives. So when I'm talking about checking in for with your GIS team for these layers, this is what it's producing. So we want to make sure we have that on hand and it's up to date for the 25-26 season. And you do that same thing for every season following. The next one up is going to be making sure that our reporting matches. So this seems a little bit silly because it doesn't change too often. Just like the road network, it doesn't change too often, but when it does, we typically see some pretty large changes, even stuff that just might throw us off a little bit. So this is getting into things like making sure our materials, when we're capturing them, are aligned with the trucks themselves. So if I have 10 tandem plows out there, or 10 tandem spreaders that are out there with 50-50 mix in position number 1, pure sand in position 2, and pure salt in position 3, does that match across all 10 of my trucks? And then also, is it coming back in the Geotab the same way? So if I'm looking at position 1, which is my mix, am I looking at my reporting that comes back, that material management report? Is it correctly identifying and showing me mix in position 1 for all my assets? If it's not, we can do a quick fix. There's tools inside of our reports where we can relabel things. So it might be something simple as this year, their operations supervisor decided that we're going to move mix to position 3 and salt and sand to the first 2, upended us from what we were doing last year. But we've unified it. We just make corrections with Geotab. So if that happened, let us know. We can help you move that stuff around. Also, making sure that your trucks themselves are consistent. So if you have a whole bunch of, say we have our 10 Rexroth CS550 controllers, and some of them have salt on position 1, some of them have mix on position 1, super important you get out there as part of that hardware process and check that those categories are actually matching. Because otherwise, what's going to happen by accident is you're going to have half your trucks reporting mix on position 1, and the other half are going to say it's actually using salt. And when we see that back in Geotab, you're going to have a report that shows you a really weird number that you weren't expecting, because you're like, hey, well, that doesn't make any sense. I know we have it on paper that shows us we had 500 tons of, X material, 200 tons of the other one. Why am I seeing this weird blended number? It's because your materials were in the wrong positions. So make sure that your trucks also have the same consistency on the material positions as much as your Geotab reporting has it on the software end. Super important. Make sure your numbers stay lined up and working correctly. And then number 3 here, just close out because we're want to open up for potential Q&A, is that we want to make sure that our data sharing is making sense as well. So this is a bit more ethereal, I suppose, compared to the really practical operations of making sure your Geotab is plugged in, making sure your spreader control cabling is working, things are configured properly. Those are all the per asset level stuff that needs to get done to make sure that everything's successful. But then we also want to check on things like our data feeds. So for example, a few of our customers publish their data out to, say, ArcGIS Velocity. So they don't use the internal route completion tool I was just showing you a minute ago. They actually pipe that data out directly into their own geospatial environment, and they provide tooling for their internal teams as well as the public via their Esri environment. So they bypass some of the Geotab reporting completely and just feed all that data out into their geospatial group, and that data feed is what is driving the key software components of what we're providing from the telematics system. So this is, like I said, a little bit more ethereal, but also double check that, especially if you're in your position where you're the one coordinating that, say as the fleet manager or the owner of the data products. Make sure that your Geotab feed is online this year, because we might have a big storm for first thing out of the gate. Anything can happen in the snow world. So we have a big snowstorm first thing out of the gate. Somebody forgot to turn on the switch to start pulling data from Geotab into Esri. All of a sudden, your snowplow map isn't working, and you're getting a call from the mayor saying, hey, why can't I see where my plows are to show up to the news? Something simple that needs to just get taken care of as part of our winter life as well. So it's about the assets, it's about the software configuration on Geotab, and it's also about where that data is going to your different applications that are powering your internal operations or your public-facing operations as well. Making sure that's all lined up and on and operating, and you're getting data from truck flowing through all the way to the other end out to your public dashboard. So as a quick, as there's a lot of other components going on. I'll touch on a couple here, just those last couple notes, and then we can close up for Q&A. But when I was talking about that row completion feature, these color codes I'm showing you, they are customizable. So we can actually modify them, and you can have up to 8 different bands that show those color codings for your internal use. So those will just be essentially, you can train your staff and say, if you see this color, this means, you know, you've serviced that road within an hour, hour and a half, or it's been more than 5 hours, more than 10 hours, whatever it might be. Making sure that's color coded correctly. All the same kind of point as making sure your materials are in the right positions, your reporting has the right names attached, they're going to the right people, and your data feeds are in the right spot. So overall, there's lots of resources to help you out. You take it step by step. A lot of this kind of these measurements and all these different pieces rolling, you can kind of segment them all into a very straightforward line, making sure that everything from the vehicle is working correctly, making sure it's properly set up in the software, and then finally making sure that whatever data leaves the software and goes somewhere else is working correctly as well. Step through it piece by piece. It's a pretty, you just kind of successfully hit those checkboxes. We have resources for you. We can get resources for you if you need them, and we're here to help you folks. So feel free to reach out, like I said, to your account manager or the support team. Happy to jump in and help you folks. So with that, thank you very much for listening to the last 55 minutes of Winter Light Up for 2025. I'm just going to jump into the chat here to see if we have any questions from our live viewers. And actually, I think we just have a quick comment from Andrew Wang, one of our specialists for winter, is just to let us know that contact our support team if you're missing some of these components. So that's actually a really great point, Andrew, is make sure that if you're missing anything, all the stuff I showed you today, and you look at it and you're like, that's not, I don't have that feature. It's not showing up for me. Please definitely reach out to us to make sure you have that enabled. Last thing we want is to start the winter season and find out that something was missing in that puzzle, and we could have filled that piece in earlier. Let us know ahead of time, and we can make sure that you're set up for success. But with that, thank you for attending our webinar today. Appreciate everybody's time, and for everybody listening after the fact, thanks for tuning in, and thanks for getting your fleet ready to go for winter. Yeah, and here's to a successful 2025-2026 winter season.